Welcome everyone to the Office Add-ins community call. As we get started here, just a few notes about the call itself. First of all, our next call after this will be in January, after the holidays, Wednesday, January 9th. That'll be the fourth call in our quarterly series that we set up last year or earlier this year. After the January call, we're actually going to increase the cadence of this call to monthly. So instead of doing quarterly calls starting in February of 2019, we'll be doing these calls each month. So when you see these calls, for anybody who's new to the call joining us for the first time today, we typically spend our time talking about what's new with the Office Add-ins platform and APIs. You get a chance to hear directly from members of the product teams that are building the Office Add-ins platform and APIs. And we typically feature at least one kind of technical deep dive topic in each call where you actually get to dig in and learn in depth about something. And of course, we take your questions and try to answer as many of those as we can on the call. Encourage you to type your questions into the chat window during today's call. If we don't get to your question today, feel free to use the form. I'll show the link at the end of this call to submit your question, and we'll be publishing a blog post to kind of recap the call later today or sometime tomorrow, and we'll try to address your question there. All right, so in terms of the agenda today, we're going to kick off with a brief overview of the Office Add-ins platform itself. Doug's going to help us out with that. We'll talk a little bit about the Outlook JavaScript API and what's new there. Same thing for the Excel API, lots of new developments there in the last month or two, so we'll recap some of those new developments and take a look at what's coming next. And then our deep dive today is actually Excel custom functions. We talked a little bit about that last time. You saw a demo, I think, in the last community call. This time we'll take a little bit more of an in-depth look at custom functions, learn about some new things that have changed and been added since the last time we showed custom functions. And of course, as I mentioned, we'll take your questions along the way. Just a brief look at the presenters here. We have myself, Kim, Doug, Sahil should be joining us shortly. Juan and Kare will be presenting today. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand off to Doug.
Thanks, Kim. Hang on, I'll switch over here. I think you're seeing my slide. So everyone, thanks for being here with us today. I know most of the people on the call are familiar with the new JavaScript approach to building add-ins for Office, so I'm just going to, in the next minute or two, give a high-level overview for anyone who isn't familiar with the new approach. Oh, hang on. Need to project a slide here. Are you seeing what we have on the screen right now, the slide?
No.
You need to request. Can you?
Yeah, I can see your screen. So there we go.
Okay, so Office add-ins. We used to have COM add-ins. Now we have the modern JavaScript add-ins, web add-ins, and key concept here is they are just a web app. Yeah, okay. And then that web app, key concept here is if you know how to build a web app, if you know how to work in JavaScript or TypeScript and CSS and HTML, you already know how to build an add-in. The only thing that makes it an add-in is we have a manifest file that points at your web app, and that's how you load the add-in into the Office client. So as a developer, you can sideload into your device to test your add-in. You can put that manifest file in the store to publish it. There are other corporate deployment options, corporate catalog for approved add-ins within your organization. And it's just a web app. And then the final piece of the puzzle here is that add-in, like any web app, it can go to web APIs out on the web. It can go to Microsoft Graph. But kind of the cool thing is the Office.js wrapper around the various Office APIs lets your JavaScript code in that web app get at the currently open document or the Office UI, other aspects of integrating tightly with Office so that people who live all day in Outlook or Excel can just turn to your add-in and has access to the same things they're seeing in their document. So those Office.js APIs, that's at the heart of what Sohail, Kare, and Juan are going to talk about in more detail now. So with that, I think, let's see, Kare next? Juan next, sorry. Juan, I'll let you project here.
While he's doing that, Doug, Henry asked when the add-ins will work within shared mailboxes.
So, good question, Henry. I think I saw your question come in via the forum today. I'll tell you what, Sahel is actually our Outlook expert here within the team, and he's on the call. Sahel, can you jump in there?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Yeah, actually, thanks for asking that. Support for shared mailboxes is something actually quite a few of our partners want. We are actively working on it right now. As always, I cannot share a specific timeline because of like a variety of factors that can affect the release date of those features. But as I said, we are actively working on that right now. Development is in progress, and we hope to make that generally available sometime in the first quarter of calendar year 2019.
All right. Thank you, Sohail. So I'm going to jump with the Excel JavaScript API content, guys. Hello, everybody. My name is Juan Balmori. I'm the program manager of the Excel JavaScript API. And during the next few minutes, I'm going to give you a few updates on the JavaScript API for Excel. And I actually have just 3 key messages for you this morning. We just assigned 10 minutes for the call. So the first message that I want to give you is, love this chart. The Excel API, we heard loud and clear the feedback from our developer community. And, they want to build more add-ins and expose more capabilities within their add-ins, building more quality add-ins, but they didn't have enough APIs in Excel to do it. And as you can see, this chart is showing us all the releases of the JavaScript API, and the last 2, 1.7, who was announced GA at Build. And just recently, last week in Orlando, we also GA the 1.8 API for Excel, as well as some additional beta APIs. And as you can see, there's a huge, drop. We shipped in the last year or so more than 1,000 APIs for you guys to be working in Excel. And we did it in a way that not necessarily we know the telemetry and we know what are the most popular APIs in Excel. But the gist that we did this time is that we not only doing the most popular APIs, but we are also analyzing patterns of usage against types of add-ins, or how you guys, types of solutions that you create for Excel. And we try to enable those end-to-end scenarios like reporting, data analysis, bulk updating to a backend, fast, also improvements in performance and so on and so forth. That's the first message, guys. So right now, the API in Excel is the richest of all. We actually did focused mostly, as you will see with Sohail, in Outlook and in Excel. And I think we're closer than ever closing the gap between what you can do in JavaScript and VBA. So that's wonderful news for Excel developers. The second message that I want to give you is, as you can see on this chart, all the way to 1.7, and again announced at Build. During Ignite, we actually announced the 1.8 APIs, GA. So this is now in the production CDN. And briefly, the content that 1.8 has is, data validation. We finally shipped it. You guys can include it, ship your add-ins to the store. We have pivot table, for the types of solutions that require analysis and all that. So you can actually have a very rich API to create pivots and to create, many dimensions in rows and columns and different visualizations. You will see in a second. We added a bunch of new events. So historically, the API supported, just a data change event, a selection change event, but it wasn't rich with regards to, for example, what specific data change or what is the range associated with the selection. And we also exposed selection for other types of objects. So right now, if you move between worksheets or if you select a chart or if you, the calculation as well, when we can actually subscribe to an event that tells you when the calculation is finished within the document. And we did other things that are commonly used like grid lines, sheet headings. We added functionality like remove duplicates from a range. And we added a lot of charts. You will see that a lot of the investments that we did, we actually teamed up with the Ideas product that you probably saw at Ignite, and that is analyzing data within your workbook and proposing new kind of visualizations or pivot tables or charts. So the chart investment was very heavy. No? And finally, we are announcing also the beta, new APIs on beta. There are like 400 APIs around shapes, more charts. We're providing auto filters for ranges. We now support discontinuous ranges as well, and a few functions that return discontinuous ranges like special cells, find. We also enable some reporting scenarios about page layout, copy, paste, save. And you can see all the content. 1 second, what is that noise? Okay, so I'm not sure what was this noise, guys. Sorry about that. So with that, I'm going to jump to a few demos to show you some of the highlights and some of my favorite features. So the first demo that I want to show you, it's around some of the perf improvements we made on the API. This script is during our Ignite presentation, we actually did a flight tracker simulator, and basically was helping, and probably Kayer is going to talk a little bit about this, but was simulating for airlines, how many tickets they can oversell on a given flight. Which is a scenario that is super bad for us, but for an airline, they need to have all this data. No? And the first part was about inserting data. The only thing that I want to show you here are the perf improvements we've made in the API. No? So right here, I'm simulating inserting 3 years of data into the workbook. And as you can see right now, I'm inserting around 252,000 cells in just one second. No? If I have less windows open, I can get better times, but around less than a second to insert 252,000 cells. And I can have here more, for example, let me insert almost 1 million cells. As you can see here, this was inserted in 3.4 seconds. So this is a huge improvement against previous telemetry. No? Right now I'm inserting 2.5 million cells, and as you can see, I'm going to get inserted in 10 seconds, no? Which is kind of relatively. We're still not in the VBA ballpark, but this is kind of very acceptable performance. No? 2.5 million cells in just 10 seconds. So that's the first demo that I want to do. I also want to show you another demo, which is about creating pivots. This one I'm going to show you in Excel Online.
Guys, I heard some comment that people are only seeing the slide, not the demo you're showing. Is everybody able to see the demo that Juan is showing?
Yeah, we're presenting here in the room and can see the demo.
Yeah, if you're not seeing it, I would suggest dialing out and dialing back in. That generally seems to fix either the audio or the visual. So,
okay.
Go ahead.
So this demo is about creating pivots. So you'll find the code if you want to go to my personal gist at GitHub. Basically, it's inserting some data into the workbook, and then I'm able to create a pivot in Excel Online. No? So you can see here that the pivot was created based on this data. It's very simple data, just geographic data associated with how many dogs and cats are in some states in the US and Mexico. So it's very dummy data, but you get the point. I'm able to add columns. As you can see here, I'm able to add rows and values and many things. And also the pivot API right now that we shipped focuses on the creation of pivots. And so you have multiple capabilities of creating pivots. The second example that I want to show you, and it's just a glimpse, guys. If you want to see more details, please go to our website and see the samples. This is another very common scenario for Excel development, which is about creating an additional workbook. So that scenario is you want to select corporate templates and start playing with this with a new workbook. No? So this is basically just opening a new workbook within Excel Online. Let me show you this. So this add-in actually lets you select, in this case, another workbook. And when I select it, it will actually create another Excel file in OneDrive with your permission, of course, and then basically it will open the Excel file. And then you have capabilities of, for instance, not only opening the workbook, but also adding, open it with an add-in as a companion, and then being able to interact with it. Finally, a couple of more demos for you guys. I want to show you some of the charts and reports investments we did. So for that, I'm gonna open another Script snippet here, and I'm gonna show you where's my snippets? Here's my snippets. This is the one that I want to show you. This is just to show you a glimpse of all the new charts that we support in the API, as well as the reporting capabilities. Again, I'm adding some sample data here about that store and some sales. And then I'm going to be creating several types of charts here, from the very basic chart types, lines. But you can see we can now split it, and we can have access to the headers, and we can modify the axis, how the data is displayed there and formatted, adding secondary access to a chart, and then also change the formatting of a chart. And as you can see here, we can also add other types of charts, and we can provide negative colors to those charts. Whisker charts to identify outliers like this. And then finally, another scenario that is very prevalent in Excel is the one to create a report. So when you click on prepare report here, you will see that we are actually setting up a print area on the workbook. And if I go to the print preview, you will see that effectively I have this nice look and feel that I can add headers, footers. I can, put my content in the middle and provide page breaks and so on and so forth. Okay, last demo for you guys, just because I'm running out of time here. I'm going to show you a demo about shapes. So we recently, as you know, provide a shapes API. And basically, a shape in Excel is everything that floats within the workbook. And that can be an image, a chart, a geometric shape. And developers use shapes for many things within Excel. But we wanted to do something fun for a demo, so I asked my team, hey, let's show the power of the Shapes API by coding a Tetris game. So basically that's what they did, and as you can see here, hopefully when I click on play, we're going to add a nice display, and then there you go. I'm going to start playing Tetris here, and it's fully functional. I can actually rotate the shapes, and you can see this is a lot of positioning and the colors, and also having this motion simulation here. So it's a fully functional Tetris game right within Excel, showing you the power of shapes, the Shapes API. So with that, I would like to summarize my participation in the call. For the folks that are in the UK or in Europe, next week is going to be the Develop Excel conference. I'm going to be there, with Charles sharing this and way more detail. If you are around, please go. It's a great event for Excel developers. And obviously, the call to action here is make sure to use the 1.8 APIs that we recently shipped to production. And also, please try the APIs in beta. Give us feedback, and your feedback is super important for us. We consider it for improving our designs and all that. If you feel that something is missing, please also let us know. And thank you very much for being on the call.
Awesome. Thanks, Juan. All right, so we're going to loop back, and Sahil's going to talk about what's new with the Outlook APIs. Sahil, if you have the deck ready, feel free to go ahead and present there. Start sharing.
Sure. I will set that. Just give me 1 second. Or actually, do you have the deck? Can you show the slides, and then I will skip to my laptop for demo?
Yep, absolutely. 1 second here.
Thank you.
Let's see. Yep, no problem.
In the meantime, I'm going to answer some questions here. So document events. Document events are coming. We're going to provide some save and some save events and stuff. So just keep an eye on the preview then.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Hey everyone, my name is Sahil Zafar. I'm a program manager in the Outlook Extensibility Platform team. And I'll just quickly start with a very brief overview of Outlook add-ins, because again, in my experience, usually there are people who know a lot about add-ins, and then there are folks in the audience who are learning about it and try their hands on it. So to start with, as Ted mentioned earlier, similar to overall architecture, the add-in is mainly nothing more. It's a very simple architecture. It is hosted on a website, web service, and the second part of that is the XML file, which is the manifest. The manifest is installed in the user's mailbox, and we leverage the manifest to show the experience to the end user. And the manifest defines at a high level 3 things. Which page to load, which page is the landing page. It defines the permission model your add-in has, and it defines what do you get, how the add-in is surfaced to the end user. And speaking of how the add-in is surfaced to the end user, you have add-in commands where your add-in can put a button on the ribbon. On the left-hand side, top left, you can see how the add-in looks in Outlook for Web. And then on the right-hand side, you can see how that looks for Outlook for Desktop. Can you click next, please? And then the second way to surface those entry points to your end users is through detected entities. And here you can see that text was highlighted, a meeting entity was detected, and the add-in was triggered. When a user clicked on that highlighted text, the add-in was triggered in the Boomerang add-in in this case. And can you click next? Thank you. And third way the add-in can be surfaced is through custom modules. And custom modules, as you can see the icons, such as mail and calendar in the bottom, you can have your own icon down there. And when a user clicks on that icon, basically the right-hand surface in the Outlook becomes your playground, and you can surface the experience there. Outlook Customer add-in, Outlook Customer Manager, which is an add-in that Microsoft developed, is available today. If you have the Office E5 SKU, and if you want to, you can look at that to see that, like how the power of the module add-ins. Next, please. All right, so in terms of what's new for Outlook, so we're happy to announce that a lot of our partners were asking for meetings and appointment-related APIs to make the existing add-in scenarios that work on meetings better. So that said, we have announced the general availability of requirements at 1.7 at Ignite, which was basically September 22nd. As part of that requirement set, we have the recurrence API and event handler available. So using the JavaScript API, you can get the meeting recurrence, the recurrence of a meeting, recurrence frequency of a meeting. You can also register event handlers for when a recipient is changed, or when a recurrence is changed, or when an appointment time is changed. You can also get the organizer of the meeting when you are composing an appointment or a meeting, and you can also get the from field when you're composing an email or a meeting. So that's about requirements at 1.7. Outlook for Web persistent task pane has been also made generally available in and it's just a simple manifest change. It's called support spinning. If your manifest includes that, the task pane can now be pinned in Outlook for Web. It was something we had before in Outlook for Desktop, but at Ignite, we also announced that it's generally available for Outlook for Web as well. Next, please. And then in preview, there was a question earlier regarding shared mailboxes. So as I said earlier, our target is first quarter of calendar year 2019 to make that generally available. But the good thing is that the capability is available in desktop and Mac in preview right now. So if you're you as a partner or your end user, they can go enroll in the Insiders Fast channel and can download bills where they can play with add-ins in shared mailboxes. We also, some of you may be following the announcement we made at Ignite regarding the general availability, not general availability, regarding the availability of the new Outlook for Web experience to targeted release, which is about 10% of our overall enterprise audience. So, and I'll show a quick demo of how that, how the new looks like and how the add-ins experience look like. But we have also made calendar add-ins available in that. So right now in new OVA, you have both mail and calendar add-ins, the complete experience available for you. Cool. So I'm seeing a bunch of questions I'm actually going to answer. I'll hold off answering them till we get to the Q&A time. In the meantime, let me just quickly show you some these APIs in action. So I'm going to take control of the desktop. Let me know if you're able to see my desktop.
Yep, looks good. We can see it, Sahil.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So to start with, I'll show you the. So this is an add-in Kim here helped develop for demo purposes. It's called Room Validator. And to show you how that works, I will actually, and it shows you the new JavaScript 1.7 APIs in action. So let me add some folks here. So as you can see, I have a bunch of participants for the meeting, and the meeting is at noon. I will click the add-in. Oh, sorry, I need to start my web server because the files are hosted on the local host. Okay, so my web server is started. So here you can see I launched the add-in. It's telling me choose a room. If I select a room, and it's telling me that the capacity of the room is 2 and the room is available in the PM. I click select. So as you can see, the room capacity is insufficient and the room is unavailable because the timing of the room is actually, the room is not available during that time. I think there's a small typo there, my apologies. But you get the idea that here actually when I changed the time of the room, it actually, the event was fired and it's your add-in is responding that the room is not available. And if I actually pick a different room and select that, you can see that the room capacity is sufficient. So there are APIs available now that will show you that like how you can get capacity of the the number of recipients on an appointment, and also the appointment time, and also have an handler for when the if any of the recipients change or any of the appointment times change. So that's actually one key thing that I wanted to show you guys, then also show everyone, and also wanted to quickly show you the add-ins experience in the new Outlook for Web in case you haven't seen this. So in the new Outlook, actually, there are a couple of things. We have made the entry point more visible compared to, if you remember previously, in order to get add-ins, a user will have to go to settings menu and they would see the manage add-ins button here. In this new experience, actually, you can acquire add-ins right from here by clicking on get add-ins. It shows the store experience right there. And then you have the option of pinning the add-in. So here I can launch the Trello add-in. And also I can go to settings and view all Outlook settings. I do click on actions. And here you can see I can actually pin commands, including add-ins, on the compose surface. Here I have Trello pinned, or I can also go do that in the compose surface where I have these add-ins pinned. And then more recently, we made calendar add-ins available in calendar as well. So here in the calendar experience in the new Outlook for Web, when I click on the new meeting or appointment, add-ins show up here. And similar to mail, I can acquire the add-ins right from the appointment or meeting, the add-ins that are applicable. And also I can go and pin the commands onto the main surface bar of this of a new meeting or an appointment. There was actually so that's at a high level, like the new capabilities that we have launched. And then I will hold off on answering the questions till we get to the end. With that, I'll stop sharing my screen.
Awesome. Good stuff. Thanks, Sahil. All right. Next up, we have Kerry. He's going to talk about custom functions. Sharing his screen now.
So, hey everyone, my name is Kayer. Here to talk to you and give you a deep dive into the world of custom functions. At the same time, wanted to just, I'm going to walk you through some of the same quote-unquote slide deck that Juan and I walked our audience through at night. One of the interesting things that we learned, which is if you use Excel for PowerPoint, it actually adds more post-processing time for videos for Ignite. So that's one of the reasons why our Excel Solutions Palooza video is still being processed. So hopefully we'll get that made available out to you soon. But one of the things we just talked about, recapped Office add-ins. I think Doug already mentioned that. But you'll see in the video, we did want to provide some interaction. So when we did our NDA or our dry run for Ignite, Martin, I think who's on the call, he gave some good feedback of, hey, make it more interactive. So here, one of the things we did just to showcase Office add-ins was we asked who in the audience was a BDM, an IT pro, and a dev. And we were able to insert like a people graph and just to showcase the power of add-ins. And also it was important because that's segued into what are our building blocks for Office add-ins. And that's where custom functions come in. Along with the APIs that Juan talked about, custom functions are a building block. They're a part of an add-in. And we like to think about them as a core data model integration in that, hey, users will use them just like any other formulas. So with that, I'm going to dive in. So as I said, custom functions are powered by add-ins, and they should really feel like any other formula within inside of Excel. You should be able to use them, save them, share workbooks. Other folks should be able to access them. Of course, there are some different capabilities or more power that you get with custom functions that you necessarily won't get with built-in functions. So when we talk about the different capabilities or scenarios that you can do, in my mind there's four major things that I like to think about. One is just being able to create reusable logic and calculations for your users. And so I'm going to, as I will talk through these scenarios, I'm going to use, I have a redraw issue going on. I'm going to use ScriptLab, and for folks who aren't familiar with ScriptLab, Juan showed it. ScriptLab is an Office add-in that lets you build and try out our APIs. It's available in the store, and one of the things that we did announce that Ignite that was coming soon and is now available is custom function support inside of ScriptLab for both Excel and Excel Online. So even you don't really have to worry about trying to get the latest Insiders build. Just go to office.com, sign in, open up ScriptLab, and we'll highlight how you can use custom functions as part of that. So here I'm going to showcase a code snippet that I have, and you can actually find this on GitHub. Let me quickly show you how. If you just go to github.com, search for gist, and you can put in my handle, and you'll be able to import, just search for Carrier32, and you'll see it's this sample gist, which is this demo custom function XML. And so these have a variety of different functions, and you can just go ahead inside of ScriptLab, click the hamburger icon, click import, and copy and paste that in. So I've already done that here, and we have a few different custom functions. And ScriptLab, I think, will be your easiest way to pick up and prototype with custom functions. So the first one that we have is a contains function. And the way you register them is you have to click this functions tab in the ribbon. This will dynamically register these functions per discussion. So now I can say try a simple contains function, which I always wish Excel had. And I can use cell referencing here, and I can say, hey, does that text contain the word rock? And that should evaluate to true. Likewise, if I change that value, the dependency updates, and now you get false. So this is a case of simple calculation, but it really showcases this custom functions are, in fact, just like regular functions, just like VBA, UDFs, and XLL UDFs. All right. So the other thing I wanted to highlight is really all you need to do is add this comment on top of your function, and that's what the code will do, and it will automatically go and create the metadata required to register that function with Excel. All right. So the next function we had was a stock quote function, and so this one, it's for simplicity, it's just calling a public service. Close out of this. A free API that we use. Just an API that is making a web request. And one of the things that we've realized is this is a fairly common pattern in terms of when we've been speaking to partners, they have services on their back end and they want to bring in that information real time into Excel. So here is just an example of how to go and make that web request. So now I can say stock price or stock quotes, and likewise go get what the Microsoft stock quote is. Now we also have a streaming function. Okay, someone's asking for control. I'm going to say no. We also have the ability to say, hey, a streaming function. So as data changes on your back end, we can go and pull for that data. So in this example, I'll do a CF sample dot price stream. The CF sample is actually a test add-in that we use internally, but just for purposes, I can go do that, and this one will actually go and get whatever the latest stock price is, and as that value changes in the market, I think this pulls every second, this will be reflected here. So at Ignite, unfortunately, the values did change, but the interesting part about these demos is you're at the mercy of the live service. A better example I can show you is, let's say you had a timer or a countdown. For example, this one is a count up, which just simply increments every few seconds. So this showcases how streaming functions work. And in the past, you would essentially have to wrap up your UDF with the RTD function. But now we're building this capability in directly into streaming into custom functions, so we can make that work in online and on the Mac. Okay, like that. Now the other capability I wanted to mention is around bringing in intelligence, or not only just real-time data, but your back-end service capabilities into your users inside of Excel. So one of the demos we had up at Ignite, this was at our booth that folks loved, which was a translate function. And if you look at this code where we're calling stock price, you can notice we're just using an XML HTTP request. If we go down into, let me skip I need to roll up. Where did my translate function go? Oh, interesting. Okay, let me go back and import that gist again. I think I was, one of the things I am working on, and maybe this will come as a blog post, is how to connect custom functions to a Microsoft Flow. So I was trying to get that ready for you last night, but I ran into some cores issues, so I'm working through a proxy right now. So let me overwrite existing. So trust. Okay. That's not what I wanted. Okay, here we go. So here is that translate function that we have. And again, all we're doing here is making a backend call to my service, which is actually doing the heavy lifting. And in this case, this service is wrapped in an Azure function. So I wanted to highlight that. Go into my Azure portal. I have an Azure function here, which is using Microsoft's cognitive services to go and call the API. And this code can be in the language of your choice. Here, I've done that in C#. And really all I had to do was find that quick start on docs.microsoft.com, spent a couple hours, got the actual key, and then I was able to build this Azure function. And what this Azure function simply does is it just makes that request to Microsoft's translator services and returns that result. So with a little bit of Azure functions and a little bit of JavaScript, we can essentially build in a function like equals translate, which will take. I have some interesting redry issues in this latest internal build. The references were off, so I need 19 and C20. And this will translate hello world into Spanish. And then I think most of you may have seen this demo before, but if we want to know where the bathroom is, we can go and do that. Likewise, we can change the locale. So if we want to know how that looks like in Japanese, we're able to do that. Now, the other scenario that was announced at Ignite was an awesome new feature inside of Excel called dynamic arrays. And with traditional UDFs and arrays, if your function was returning multiple values back, your users would have to know, okay, how many rows is my result, and how many columns is my result? Control Shift Enter that just to get that essentially that data back. But now with dynamic arrays, we can create formulas like a import HTML function. And again, this was just, I'll show you the code in a second, it's just another Azure function that's wrapped. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and pull in some information about custom functions. So if you want to learn more, aka.ms/custom functions is a short link to our documentation. And here I'm going to say, hey, get me that first table that's on that site. So when I go and do that, it will go, I'll call my Azure function and return that result back, and it will automatically fill down as needed. Now, if I have some values here, it would there's a new error that you get, which is fill. So what's even cooler is I can actually use that array, so to speak, in other formulas. So there's a sort function. I just use the pound syntax, and I say, hey, I actually want to sort the file format column in this table. So here I'll just say the sort index is 2, and the sort order is ascending. And really quickly, I've gone and sorted that table inside of Excel. All right, so those were a few demos that we have. Really, the thing I would recommend is if you go into Script Lab, it will make prototyping a lot easier. But when it comes time to actually building these, we have some new documentation that I did want to highlight that will give you some resources. So if I actually go pull up the website, aka.ms custom functions, by the way, the dark mode in docs.microsoft.com is super cool. So I love reading documentation in dark mode. So we did update our documentation for Ignite, and one of the things that we didn't really talk through, but one of the things that we really care about is performance and having a small memory footprint for these custom functions. Now, we still have a ton of work to do here, but one of the things we launched at Ignite was on Windows, custom functions now run or execute within the custom functions runtime. And I wanted to highlight that article and just showcase what it is. So the reason why we did it is, again, performance, footprint, And the way to think about this is before, in the preview, we were actually running custom functions in an invisible iframe. Now we're just loading the core JavaScript that's needed to execute that function. The model I have is if you're familiar with like Node.js, it's already equivalent of that. So Node.js, one of the things it does not have is access to the document object model. So it means, hey, we actually needed to expose some APIs as part of this to let you make requests to get data. So there's a couple things that you can do to fetch data from the web. You can use XML HTTP request. Likewise, we have a polyfill that wraps with, if you're familiar with the Fetch API, you can use that. You can get data back from WebSockets as well if you need more real-time communication. Now, one of the things that we've seen is, well, one of the implications of the new runtime is the fact that it's actually running separately from your task pane in your web view. And because of that, we needed a model to essentially allow you to pass in state from your task pane or your web views into your custom functions and share state. And a common scenario for this may be, hey, you want to authenticate the user before they make custom function request to pull in data from your backend surface. So one of the APIs that I wanted to bring attention to was this async storage API. And what this allows you to do is essentially pass in state to and from your web view and your custom functions. The state does not live in your document, so you don't have to deal with like your access tokens being passed around within the document and all of that. So highly recommend you look into that. The other thing to call out here is a update to our metadata. And coming in October 4th, and I'm going to talk about our roadmap in a minute, but coming in the October 4th, we are introducing a breaking change for folks who have built custom functions before. And the reason for this is to support the ability for your custom functions to be localized in different languages. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to introduce an ID parameter for each of the functions. The ID parameter is what we use to save that function name in the document. Then the names and descriptions will be localized. So at runtime, if the description needs to be different for Spanish, you can provide a Spanish description. So once we have that, we'll provide more info there. Okay, the last bit is I mentioned, hey, the quickest way to prototype is through ScriptLab. And now the quickest way to actually build a custom function is to follow this tutorial. This tutorial will walk you through how to build a custom function through the YoOffice. We have some new JavaScript and TypeScript templates for YoOffice here. And this will actually walk you through how to build that stock quote function that I demoed earlier. So highly recommend that. Quick note about debugging. Right now, all the partners that we've been working with, they've tended to use Excel Online. I agree right now that would be what I would recommend if you are using YoOffice is to run the start web command and sideload your add-in on Excel Online. That way you can use just like the built-in F12 browser debugging capabilities. So with that, let me switch gears and talk a little bit about what's coming up next. And really the feedback that we've heard from all of you guys and how we want to help evolve the platform. So as I mentioned, custom functions are still in developer preview, and our goal is to have our goal for the preview was to get feedback, and we wanted to highlight what we're doing to address that feedback. So in October, ScriptLab support for custom functions in Excel on Windows and online. So that fork, I think that rolls out maybe next week. Typically, it's like the middle of October. One of the issues that we heard was before you had to declare your types, either a string or a number, and it didn't really work too well for error handling. So we're introducing an any type coming up. And then as part of this change, we'll also have default values in our custom functions metadata. So it will be less verbose. So we heard feedback that it was just a pain in the butt to create that big JSON file. So we're doing two things there. One is just adding smart defaults. And then the other thing we'll do, which we'll roll out later, is auto generation of that metadata. So like in ScriptLab, how we had the doc comments where you decorated it with a comment with @custom function, you'll be able to decorate your parameters and return values with the same. Already talked about localization, so that's also coming next week. And then in November, that's when we're still working on debugging support for Windows, so we'll roll that out. If you are a partner, I know Edwin is on the call. We're going to hopefully have you guys test that flow out for us well before November. So expect news from me later this week on how to dock with that. Optional parameters, so right now just hooking up the optional arguments that you can do, and really you'll just have to declare this additional flag. One of the things that we heard was the namespace was a hindrance for a lot of folks who didn't depend on it with their existing UDF, so you'll now be able to omit that. Caller.address, we're going to bring that, we're actually working on that right now, and hope that will be available in November. So caller.address, for folks who don't know, this allows you to know, hey, this custom function was called on cell A1. Then December, we're working on volatile function support, as well as doing some bug fixing around just manual recalc and the streaming functions. So we return streaming functions consistently for the same arguments. So that's what's upcoming in terms of new capabilities. And then in 2019, our goal is going to be to focus on stabilization, perf, and getting it ready for you. Just as a quick note, as we get closer to when we think we're at high quality and we can make this available to all users, developers will get a month of advance notice, so we can, as we'll open the store up for submission for custom functions. And then the other change for Ignite, we removed references. Previously, we had you would declare your custom function as a sync function or an async function. We're going to change how we think about that. The way we think about custom functions is really, by default, they run out of process. They run in their own sandbox. Previously, the sync functions would allow you to run them in process, and you would gain the benefit of multi-threaded recalc. One of the things that we're working with our partners is realizing, hey, most of the integrations we currently have on deck is tied to the out-of-process case. As such, we're going to introduce the in-process capability at a later date. And this would be, the idea here is to give IT admins control and let them opt into running your custom functions in process. But to do that, we need to have APIs. So that was all of that in terms of a custom functions update. So were there any questions?
I think we're good for now. Thanks, Kier. We're running a little short on time. We're one past the hour. Dana, are we okay a couple minutes over, or do we need to wrap up right away?
Nope. If anyone would like to stay, we're happy to answer a few more questions. If the questions go unanswered, we'll make sure that we cover those in the blog post in the Q&A portion. And then we'll also look for a recording if you're going to not stay on the call for a few more minutes. Look for an announcement about the recording and blog post in the next 24 to 48 hours on our Office Dev Twitter handle. So
Awesome.
we're happy to
Thanks,
stay. So if you want to cover some of those now, that'd be great.
Yeah, so we'll get to questions in just a minute. Before we do that, I wanted to open up the opportunity for the folks on the call to connect with us. One of the things we've heard from a few MVPs is there might be some interest in some of you actually presenting during a session, or talking for a few minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, maybe even 15, 20 minutes, depending on the topic you want to cover on one of these calls. So if you are interested, we set up this AKA MS form, office-add-ins engage with hyphens in between. Feel free to come out and submit this form and give us your name and email address. It's a really short form, 5 questions, and we'll be in touch if you're interested. Something else we ask for in this form is if you're interested, our documentation team, the team that created the docs that Kier was showing, and as well as all the Office add-ins docs, is looking for feedback. So if you're interested in connecting with the docs team and providing some feedback about maybe what you like, what you don't like, any suggestions you have for improvement, we'd love to connect with you on that front as well. So once again, if you have a chance, if you're interested in connecting with us, feel free to come out and use this form and send us your info, and we'll be in touch. All right, so Q&A. Doug, do we want to go through some of the Q&A
sure.
here?
Let's see. I've got the list here in order. So maybe, did Henry get an answer on will add-ins work with shared mailboxes? I think that was.
He did, yes. So Kier addressed that one, yeah. Or no, Sohail addressed that one, sorry.
Cool. And then Alon had a question about compose mode for Outlook iOS.
Yeah, I answered that. Yeah, I answered that on the chat window as well. It's on the roadmap, but we do not have a timeline that we can share yet.
Great, thanks, Sohail. Let's see, and then Jim had a question about allowing paid add-ins from AppSource to be centrally deployed from Office 365 admin. Anyone know where we're at on that? He was asking if that's still on the roadmap.
Yeah, I think we'll have to follow up. The folks that are most knowledgeable about the Office 365 Admin Center are not, unfortunately, on the call today, so we'll have to follow up with them online, or offline rather, and we'll try to include the answer to that in the blog post that we publish about this call later today or tomorrow.
Great. Just moving right along, Dustin had a couple of questions. One was about current status of allowing both a task pane and a content area to be used in a single add-in. Kier, any thoughts on that?
I think there was a user voice item on that. We can provide a link to that, and I would say about that. Right now, it's still on the backlog. I don't know where it is in the backlog relative to the team who owns that feature.
Cool. Let's see, and then Dustin also asked, will it ever be possible to use more sophisticated control elements in the ribbon apart from just buttons and drop-down menus with buttons? Another user voice item?
Yes, I would definitely mention that as a user voice item. I know we've had some requests from our partners recently on that.
Whoever asked that question, I would like to, if they can actually send us more details about what they're expecting. We have in mind a few functionalities we want to add to the ribbon, like for instance, just a simple enable disable, being able to create a dynamic drop-down, show, no show, and so on and so forth. But I just want to make sure that we are prioritizing that, but if we can get more feedback, will be awesome.
Great, thanks, Juan. Let's see, and then Ben had some related questions about resources field being available in appointment compose, also getting item ID from a set saved appointment without calling save async. So how you'll recall we've talked to another partner about that recently, and also retrieving custom properties across mailboxes. Maybe, Sohail, you want to take that, speak to those?
Yeah, actually, so I answered them on the chat window as well. So for the first one, which is the resources API, that work is actually in progress as we speak. As always, the best practice we follow is not to share specific timelines, because there are multiple factors that can change when we can release the feature out. and make it generally available. But I think the thing that you should keep in mind is that we are, the development on that specific API is in progress, and we hope to make that available in preview soon. Regarding the second question, which is compose mode, having the item ID in compose mode available without calling save async, that is also an ask our partners have been asking frequently. It is high on our priority list, and we understand the problems partners have because of the lack of availability of this. At this stage, what I can say that it is really high on our priority list, and we are trying to figure out when we can deliver that, but I cannot share a timeline on that. And then the third question about custom properties around shared mailboxes. Actually, if the person who asked the question, they can share a more detailed scenario on what they're trying to do using those custom properties across mailboxes, or that will be super helpful. Doug, do you know the details of those questions, or can that person ask that question?
One detail was Dimitro mentioned that it'd be nice to be able to create activation rules based on custom properties. So I guess that's one scenario that was mentioned.
Activation rules based on those custom properties. And those custom properties would be set when the add-in is installed? Because activation, what would be those activation rules be? Like one thing that I can think that if I have, I sold my item to a company and I have like 30 plus seats. So based on the activation rules, I will see, should I activate this item for that particular user or not? To me, that's how I understand activation rules. But how custom properties play into that, like a bit more details on that would be helpful for me to understand.
Okay, that's fair. Well, if we get more information on that, we'll loop back on that in the blog post.
And that was the last of the questions I had from the chat window. So.
All right, excellent.
Wait, sorry. Hey, Kim,
ahead,
wait, one more quick thing. He said when a user presses a button in an add-in, custom property is written, add-in opens automatically, and that's the scenario.
Yeah, let me think through that. I will follow up on that.
Okay, sounds great.
Great, thanks, Dana. All right, thanks everyone for joining us today. The recording for today's call will be available soon on our Office Developer YouTube channel. And as I mentioned earlier, our next call is scheduled for January 9th in the new year, and we'll start doing the monthly calls after that in February. The deck we publish will contain a link that you can submit your questions ahead of time for the next call if you have additional questions, and also the link to the recurring calendar invite if you haven't yet had that on your calendar. So I think that's it for us today, and thanks everyone for joining.